today we will be discussing about the politics of land development. So, stamps like these, issued mostly between 1955 and 1968, depicted a vision of planned development left to right, top to bottom. Damodar Valley, Bhakra Dam, Chitranjan, locomotives, Guwahati refinery, tractors, Sindri fertilizers, Bhagda Dam, electric train, wheat revolution, Hirakund Dam, Hindustan aircraft factory, ये सारी चीज़ें हुई थी. In this chapter, in the last two chapters, we have studied how the leaders of independent India responded to the challenges of nation building and establishing democracy. Let us now turn to the third challenge, that of economic development to ensure well-being of all people. As in the case of the first two challenges, our leaders chose a path that was different and difficult. In this case, their success was much more limited, for this challenge was tougher and more enduring. In this chapter, we study the story of political choices involved in some of the key questions of economic development. What were the key choices and debates about the development? Which strategy was adopted by our leaders in the first two decades and why? What were the main achievements and limitations of this strategy? Why was this development strategy abandoned in later years? Now let's talk about the Odisha villagers' protests against the POSCO plant. Staff reporter Bhubneshwar, people facing displacement by the proposed POSCO India steel plant in Jagat Singhpur district staged a demonstration outside the Korean company's office here on Thursday. They were demanding cancellation of the memorandum of understanding signed between the company and Odisha government 1 year ago. More than 100 men and women from the Gram Panchayats of Dhenikia, Nuagaon, and Gadakunjunga tried to enter the office premises, but the police prevented them. Raising slogans, the protesters said the company should not be allowed to set up its plants at the cost of their lives and livelihood. The demonstration was organized by the Rashtriya Yuva Sangathan and the Nab Nirman Samiti. The Hindu 23 June 2006 का जो है ये सीन है. Now, let's talk about the politics of land development. As the global demand for the steel increases, Odisha, which has one of the largest reserves of untapped iron ore in the country, is being seen as an important investment destination. The state government hopes to cash in on this unprecedented demand for the iron ore has signed memorandum of understanding MOU with the both international and domestic steelmakers. The government believes that this would bring in necessary capital investment and provide a lot of employment opportunities. And the iron ore resources lie in some state, and the tribal population fears that the setting up of industries would mean displacement from their home and livelihood, and the pollute the environment also, and these pollute the environment also. And the central government feels that if the industry is not if the government the central government feels that if the industry is not allowed, it would set a bad example and discourage investments in the country. Now, can you identify the various interests involved in this case? What are their key points of conflict, and do you think there are any common points on which everyone can agree? Can this issue be resolved in a way which satisfied all the various interests? As you ask these questions, you would find yourself facing yet bigger questions. What kind of development does Odisha need? Indeed, whose need can be called Odisha's need? Now, political contestation. These questions cannot be answered by an expert. Decisions of this kind involve weighing the interests of one social groups against another, present generation against future generations. In a democracy, such major decisions should be taken or at least approved by the people themselves. It is important to take advice from experts on mining, from the environments, and from economists. Yet the final decision must be a political decision taken by people's representative who are in touch with the feelings of the people. After independence, our country had to make a series of major decisions like this. Each of these decisions could not be made independent of each other, of other such decisions. All these decisions were bound together by a shared vision or model of economic development. Almost everyone agreed almost everyone agreed that the development of India should mean both economic growth and social economic justice. It was also agreed that this matter cannot be left to businessmen, industrialists, and farmers themselves, that the government should play a key role in this. There was disagreement, however, on the kind of role that the government must play in ensuring growth and justice. Was it necessary to have a centralized institution to plan for the entire country? Should the government itself run some key industries and businesses? How much importance was to be achieved? How much importance was to be attached to the needs of justice if it differed from the requirements of economic growth? इधर क्या है ये? What is left and what is right? In the politics of most countries, you will always come across references to parties and groups with a left or right ideology or leaning. These terms characterizes the position of the concerned groups or parties regarding the social change and role of the state in effecting economic redistribution. Left often refers to those who are in favor of the poor, downtrodden section and support government policies for the benefit of these sections. And the right refers to those who believe that free competition and market economy alone ensure progress and that the government should not unnecessarily intervene in the economy. Can you tell which of the parties in the 1960s were rightists and which were the left parties? Where would you place the Congress party of that time? इधर जो है ये क्या है? Each of these questions involved contestation which has continued ever since. Each of the decision had political consequence. Most of these issues involved political judgment and required consultation among the political parties and approval of the public. That is why we need to study the process of development as a part of the history of politics in India. Next जो है वो है ideas of development. Very often this contestation involves the very idea of development, and the example of Odisha shows us that it is not enough to say that everyone wants development. For development has different meanings for different sections of the people. Development would mean different things. For example, to an industrialist who is planning to set up a steel plant, to an urban consumer of steel, and to the Adivasi who lives in that region, thus any discussion on the development is bound to generate contradictions, conflicts, and debates. उसके बाद the first decade after independence witnessed a lot of debate around this question. It was common then, as it is even now, for people to refer to the West as the standard for measuring development. Development was about becoming more modern, and modern was about becoming more like to industrialized countries of the West. And this is how common people as well as the experts thought. It was believed that every country would go through the process of modernization as in the West, which involved the breakdown of traditional social structure and the rise of capitalism and liberalism. Modernization was also associated with the ideas of growth, material progress, and scientific rationality, and this kind of idea of development allowed everyone to talk about different countries as developed, developing, or underdeveloped. On the eve of independence, India had before it two models of modern development, and the liberal capitalist model as in much of Europe and the US, and the socialist model as in the USSR. You have already studied these two ideologies and read about the Cold War between the two superpowers, and there were many in India then who were deeply impressed by the Soviet model of development. And these included not just the leaders of the Communist Party of India, but also those of the Socialist Party and leaders like Nehru within the Congress, and there were very few supporters of the American-style capitalist development. Are you saying we don't have to be the Western in order to be the modern? Is that possible? ये बताना है. इधर जो next है वो क्या है? This reflected a broad consensus that had developed during the national movement, and the nationalist leaders were clear that the economic concerns of the government of Free India would have to be different from the narrowly defined commercial functions of the colonial government. It was clear, moreover, that the task of poverty alleviation and social and economic redistribution was being seen primarily as a responsibility of the government. There were debates among them. For some, industrialization seemed to be the preferred path. For others, the development of agriculture and in particular alleviation of rural poverty was the priority. Planning क्या है इधर? Despite the various differences, there was a consensus on one point, that development could not be left to private actors, that there was the need for the government to develop a design or plan for the development. इधर ये क्या है? प्लानिंग कमीशन. हाउ लकी दे आर टू हैव द प्लानिंग फॉर देम. प्लानिंग कमीशन की बात हो रही है. आई वंडर इफ द प्लानिंग कमीशन हैज एक्चुअली फॉलोड दीज ऑब्जेक्टिव्स इन प्रैक्टिस. फास्ट फॉरवर्ड नीति आयोग. द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया रिप्लेस्ड द प्लानिंग कमीशन विद अ न्यू इंस्टीट्यूशन नेम्ड नीति आयोग, नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन फॉर ट्रांसफॉर्मिंग इंडिया, एंड दिस केम इनटू एग्जिस्टेंस ऑन 1 January 2015. फाइंड आउट अबाउट इट्स ऑब्जेक्टिव्स एंड कंपोजिशन फ्रॉम द वेबसाइट लाइक दिस. प्लानिंग कमीशन की अगर हम बात करें, डू यू रिकॉल एनी रेफरेंस टू द प्लानिंग कमीशन इन योर बुक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन एट वर्क लास्ट ईयर? Actually, there was none, for the Planning Commission is not one of the many commissions and other bodies set up by the Constitution. The Planning Commission was set up in the March 1950 by a simple resolution of the Government of India. It has an advisory role, and its recommendation become effective only when the Union Cabinet approved these. And the resolution which set up the commission defined the scope of its work in the following terms. The Constitution of India has guaranteed certain fundamental rights to the citizens of India and enunciated certain directive principles of state policy. In particular, that the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall direct its policy towards securing, among other things, that the citizen, men and women, equally have the right to an adequate means of livelihood, that the ownership and control of the material resources of that community are so distributed as best to serve the common good, and that the operation of economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. इधर क्या है, in fact the idea of planning as a process of rebuilding economy earned a good deal of public support in the 1940s and 1950s all over the world. The experience of Great Depression in Europe, the interwar reconstruction of Japan and Germany, and most of all the spectacular economic growth against heavy odds in the Soviet Union in the 1930s and 1940s contributed to this consensus. Thus, the Planning Commission was not a sudden invention. In fact, it has a very interesting history. We commonly assume that private investors, such as industrialists and big businesses, entrepreneurs are averse to ideas of planning, and they seek an open economy without any state control in the flow of capital. That was not what happened. That was not what happened here. Rather, a section of the big industrialists got together in 1944 and drafted a joint proposal for the setting up a planned economy in the country. It was called the Bombay Plan, and the Bombay Plan wanted the state to take major initiatives in industrial and other economic investments. Thus, from left to right, planning for the development was the most obvious choice for the country after independence. Soon after India became the independent and the Planning Commission came into being, and the Prime Minister was its chairperson. It became the most influential and central machinery for deciding what path and strategy India would adopt for its development. The early initiatives, as in the USSR, the Planning Commission of India opted for 5 years plans, and the idea is very simple. The government of India prepares a document that has a plan for all its income and expenditure for the next 5 years. Accordingly, the budget of the central and all the state governments is divided into two parts: non-plan budget that is spent on routine items on a yearly basis, and plan budget that is spent on the 5-year basis as per the priorities fixed by the plan. A 5-year plan has the advantage of permitting the government to focus on the larger picture and make long-term intervention in the economy. The draft of the first 5-year plan and then the actual plan document released in December 1951 generated a lot of excitement in the country. People from all walks of life, academics, journalists, governments and private sector employees, industrialists, farmers, politicians, etc., discussed and debated the documents extensively, and the excitement with the planning reached its peak with the launching of the second 5-year plan in 1956 and continued somewhat till the third 5-year plan in 1961, and the fourth plan was due to start in 1966. By this time, the novelty of planning had declined considerably, and moreover India was facing acute economic crisis, and the government decided to take a planned holiday. Though many criticisms emerged both about the process and the priorities of these plans, the foundation of the India's economic development was firmly in place by them. ये फर्स्ट 5-year प्लान का जो है वो दिखाया गया है. इधर जो है ये क्या है, प्लानिंग कमीशन के बारे में दिखाया गया है कि सेंट्रलाइज्ड प्लानिंग और ये विलेज की रियलिटी नेवर से डाई लाइक दिस. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, यूएनडीपी एंड प्लानिंग कमीशन, ये दिखाया गया था. इधर जो है ये द हिंदुस्तान टाइम का एक न्यूज़पेपर का कटिंग दिखाया गया है. नेक्स्ट डे प्लानिंग कमीशन हमने डिस्कस कर लिया था. क्या द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया रिप्लेस्ड द प्लानिंग कमीशन विद द न्यू इंस्टीट्यूशन नेम्ड नीति Ayog, National Institution for the Transforming India. This came into existence on 1 January 2015. Find out about its objectives and composition from the website like this. Planning Commission क्या होता है? Do you recall any reference of the Planning Commission in your book Constitution at Work last year? Actually, there was none for the Planning Commission is not one of the many. is not one of the many commission and other bodies set up by the constitution, and the planning commission was set up in March 1950 by a simple resolution of the government of India. It has an advisory role, and its recommendations become effective only when the union cabinet approved these, and the resolution which set up the commission defined the scope of its work in the following terms. The Constitution of India has guaranteed certain fundamental rights to the citizens of India and enunciated certain directive principles of state policy, in particular that the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall direct its policy towards securing, among other things, that the citizens, men and women, equally have the right to an adequate means of livelihood, that the ownership and control of the material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good, and that the operation of the economic system does not result in the कंसेंट्रेशन ऑफ वेल्थ एंड मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन टू द कॉमन डिटर्मिनेंट. ठीक है, इधर जो नेक्स्ट क्या है, ये the early initiatives हम पढ़ रहे थे. So the draft of the first 5-year plan and then the actual plan document released in December 1951 generated a lot of excitement in the country. People from all walks of life, academics, journalists, governments and private sector employees, industrialists, farmers, politicians, etc., discussed and debated the document extensively, and the excitement with the planning reached the peak with the launching of the second 5-year plan in 1956 and continued somewhat till the third 5-year plan in 1961, and the fourth plan was due to start in 1966. By this time, the novelty of the planning had declined considerably, and moreover, India was facing acute economic crisis. The government decided to take a plan holiday, and through many criticisms emerged both about the process and the priorities of these plans, the foundation of India's economic development was firmly in place by them. Now, the first 5-year plan 1951 to 1956 sought to get the country's economy out of the cycle of poverty. K. N. Raz, a young economist involved in drafting the plan, argued that India should hasten slowly for the first 2 decades as a fast rate of development might endanger democracy, and the first 5-year plan addressed mainly the agrarian sector, including investment in dams and irrigation. Agricultural sector was hit hardest by the partition and needed the urgent attention. Huge allocation were made for the large scale projects like the Bhakra Nangal Dam, and the plan identified the pattern of land distribution in the country as the principal obstacle in the way of agricultural growth. It focused on the land reforms as the key to the country's development. 10th 5-year plan document जो वो दिखाया गया है. One of the basic aims of the planners was to raise the level of the national income, which could be possible only if the people saved more money than they spent. As the basic level of spending was very low in the 1950s, it could not be reduced anymore. So the planners sought to push savings up, and that too was difficult as the total capital stock in the country was rather low compared to the total number of employable people. Nevertheless, people's savings did rise in the first phase of the planned process until the end of the third 5-year plan. But the rise was not as spectacular as was expected at the beginning of the first 5-year plan. Later than the early 1960s till the early 1970s, the proportion of savings in the country actually dropped consistently. इधर जो next है वो क्या है, rapid industrialization. The second 5-year plan stressed on heavy industries. It was drafted by a team of economists and planners under the leadership of the P.C. Mahalanobis. If the first plan had preached patience, the second wanted to bring about the quick structural transformation by making changes simultaneously in all possible directions. Before this plan was finalized, the Congress party at its session held at Avadi near the then Madras city passed an important resolution. It declared that socialist patterns of society was its goal, and this was reflected in the second plan, and the government imposed substantial tariffs on imports in order to protect domestic industries. Such protected environment helped both public and private sector industries to grow. As savings and investments were growing in this period, a bulk of these industries like electricity, railways, steel, machineries and communication could be developed in the public sector. Indeed, such a push for the industrialization marked a turning point in the India's development. इधर जो next है वो क्या है? It, however, had its problems as well. India was technologically backward, so it had to spend species foreign exchange to buy technology from the global market. That apart, as industry attracted more investment than the agriculture, the possibility of food shortage loomed large, and the Indian planners found balancing industry and agriculture really difficult. And the third plan was not significantly different from the The Indian planners found balancing industry and agriculture really difficult. The third plan was not significantly different from the second. Critics point out that the plan strategies from this time around displayed an unmistakable urban bias. Others thought that the industry was wrongly given priority over agriculture. There were also those who wanted focus on agriculture related industries rather than the heavy ones.